This section is dedicated to what I call What's New content. This means that every time there's a major Premiere Pro update with new features that are worth exploring in the context of an essential training, I'll use this section to post the main changes. So if you've already taken this essential training or are a somewhat established Premiere Pro editor, this section will contain valuable software updates for you. But if you're a beginner, this section will not be helpful since it can be very confusing to be told what's changed in the software when you've never seen the software. So if you're a novice, skip this section for now. But don't worry, if you are a beginner, you'll still get all the necessary information because after each software update, I'll be inserting applicable videos in the course, so the new features will be presented in the proper context. All right, with that, let's get on with the What's New content. In Premiere Pro 2020, version 14.0 of the software, there was one major feature that was added to the platform, which is Auto Reframe. Other upgrades in this version were more under-the-hood enhancements or settings upgrades that fall outside the context of this essential training. But Auto Reframe is a pretty cool feature, so let's explore that now. And again, please don't watch this video if you're brand new to Premiere. What's New content is only for more experienced Premiere editors. So what is Auto Reframe? Auto Reframe allows you to automatically change the aspect ratio of your program so that you can cater to your target audience's viewing habits. This allows you to easily convert your 16:9 video to vertical or square video for social media. And the best part is Auto Reframe intelligently senses the main action in the frame. It analyzes each shot and situates the new video frame over the most important areas of action, and even keyframes the action over time. Let's take a look. In this demo, I'm going to use my sequence in my Chapter 13.1 bin, since that's where I explore Auto Reframe within the course. And so even though there's technically not any exercise files provided for What's New content, feel free to follow along there if you want. You should use Auto Reframe as a finishing tool at the end of your project. So let's say that I have my final sequence here, and it's 16:9 aspect ratio, as most video projects are. And I'm going to set it up for Auto Reframe, either by coming up to Sequence and choosing Auto Reframe Sequence, or you can select it right here in your project panel, right-click, and choose Auto Reframe Sequence. The Auto Reframe Sequence dialog box pops up, and here you can rename it if you want, and then here is where you choose the new aspect ratio that you want to change it to. There are some presets, and then you can also create your own if you want. I want square video, so I'm going to choose square 1:1. You can also apply a motion preset. This tells Premiere how much motion is in your footage, so it knows how to keyframe the effect. Slower motion is good if there is very little camera motion, like a basic talking head interview. This results in very few keyframes. You should pick default for most content. It does a good job of following the action, but it can lose track of fast-moving objects. And then there's faster motion, and this is best when there's a lot of motion in your footage and you need to follow the action from shot to shot. So something like a basketball game would be an example of when this would be a good option. Of course, some projects contain a mix of faster and slower motion, so you'll need to use your judgment for what most of the footage is. I'll choose default. You should also pick whether you want to nest the sequence or not, and it explains this pretty well here. If you don't nest, then any existing motion effect keyframes that you have on your clips will be removed. If you do nest, then you get to keep your motion keyframes, but you lose your transitions. So this is something to consider based on what you know about your source sequence. If you have a lot of original motion keyframing, you'll probably choose to nest your clips. For me, I'm going to choose not to nest. I don't have a whole lot of motion keyframes already applied, so it'll be okay. So I'll say create. All right, and you can see that a new sequence was created, and I have a new aspect ratio, a new square aspect ratio, and it has this analyzing banner. This is the Auto Reframe effect, analyzing every frame of video in my sequence and performing that intelligent reframing that I talked about. As the analysis happens, you can continue working. Now, I want to show you what's happened under the hood. On every clip, the Auto Reframe effect has been applied. So if I select the clip and come up to Effect Controls, and I come down to the bottom here, you can see that here's my Auto Reframe effect. However, most of the resulting action is up in your motion parameters, okay? So in your built-in motion effects, you can see that a couple of keyframes have been applied, which have repositioned the main action within this clip. You can edit these keyframes, of course, if you need to. And once the analysis is done, you need to go through your sequence to make sure that it did a good job on every clip. So let's see. Yeah, my analyzing banner is gone, so it is finished. And I'm just going to go through here and see how it did. right, so far so good. In fact, this one's very good. I'm just going to select this clip and press F for a match frame. And you can see what this original shot was like. Okay, so the camera's locked down and the subject walks across. But take a look at what the auto reframe effect did.
In West Waterford, Ireland, you've had 2 world wars in that time, and we've had a civil war.
Okay, and if I go to effect controls, you can see that here are the resulting keyframes. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but let's see if we can find a frame that needs a little fixing. Aha, here. I'm going to do a match frame, F, and you can see that our main action is actually over here. So let's fix that. I'm going to just select effect controls, and I'm going to blow away all these keyframes. And I can either do this from the effect controls panel, so I can bring my position over like so, or you can also just double click right here in your project panel and move over like so. Okay, and in general though, I think it's done a really nice job of including and tracking my main action. Also, just one last thing. I want to point out that because our keyframes have been injected into our motion parameters, specifically position, if I come down to the auto reframe effect, notice that the FX icon is grayed out. So you can't turn that on and off like you can most effects. However, there is this Analyze button. So if you need to blow away the keyframes and reanalyze a shot, you can. So actually, let's go back to the shot right here that we fixed. I'm just going to take away the keyframes that I manually applied. And let's reanalyze the shot and see if it picks up on Joe over there putting up the tent. I'll analyze. All right, and you can see that it found Joe. It reframed the frame appropriately. And here are my new keyframes. All right, so sometimes a targeted analysis will do a little bit better job than a blanket analysis. All right, so that's the auto reframe effect. Definitely a useful tool, especially in today's world of many different aspect ratios for many different platforms.